I used to believe that loyalty and hard work were enough, that if I gave everything I had to a vision, to an idea, it would speak for itself. That my sweat, my sleepless nights, my quiet sacrifices would one day be recognized. But life has a cruel way of teaching us that the people we trust most are often the ones holding the sharpest knives. My name is Sophia. I am 32 years old, a woman who walked away from a stable career at Google to join a rising startup because I believed in something greater than myself. I believed in building a system that could protect people, not just patch holes after the damage was done. Cybersecurity was always about being one step behind the attacker. I wanted to change that. I wanted to build something predictive, something alive, something that could see danger before it arrived. For 18 months, I poured everything into what I called precog security. It was more than code, it was the embodiment of years of research, of late-night sketching, of algorithms on napkins, of notebooks, filled with half-formed ideas that slowly matured into brilliance. Precog could detect patterns before an attack even took shape. It could adapt in real-time, learning and evolving like a living organism. I gave it everything: my intellect, my health, my time, even pieces of my soul I'll never get back. And in the end, it wasn't an enemy hacker or a faceless competitor who came for me. It was the man I trusted most, my CEO, Victor Carlton. Victor had the kind of charm that could sell water to a drowning man. Tall, immaculately dressed, with that $1 million smile that dazzled investors and colleagues alike. When he first interviewed me, he spoke about vision, about partnership, about changing the world together. I believed him. God help me, I wanted to believe him. But behind his polished words and smooth charisma, there were shadows in his eyes. Shadows I ignored because I thought my work would speak louder than his greed ever could. For a year and a half, I worked 80-hour weeks, my life consumed by precog. Victor would drop by my lab sometimes, asking questions, praising my progress. "Remarkable work, Sophia," he'd say, flashing that smile. But the way his eyes lingered on my code, the way his questions probed just a little too deeply, it should have been a warning. 3 days before everything unraveled, precog achieved what I had dreamed it could do. It predicted and neutralized a simulated attack entirely on its own, no human input. It even spotted vulnerabilities I hadn't programmed it to detect. It was alive in ways no AI had ever been before. I remember staring at the screen, heart pounding, whispering to myself, "It works. It really works." That night I barely slept, my mind racing. I thought of the lives this system could protect, the disasters it could prevent. I thought of my younger self, the girl who'd once stayed up past midnight learning to code on a hand-me-down laptop because she believed technology could change the world. She would have been proud of me. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with Victor. I walked into his office, clutching my laptop, ready to show him the breakthrough. His assistant Megan smiled thinly as she ushered me in, her eyes unreadable. But when the door closed, I realized this wasn't the meeting I'd imagined. Victor was there, yes, but so was Diana Wells, the company's lead counsel. Her presence made my stomach knot instantly. She sat with a folder in front of her, expression detached, almost clinical. "Sit down, Sophia," Victor said smoothly, gesturing to the chair across from him. I did, holding onto my laptop like a shield. Victor slid a document across the desk. "Before we discuss your project," he said, "we need to address some concerns about your employment agreement." My heart sank. Diana's voice was cool, rehearsed. Section 12.4 states that all intellectual property developed using company resources belongs exclusively to Nextech Solutions. I nodded slowly. I know the clause, but precog was initiated before I joined Nextech. I have documentation of prior work. Diana didn't even blink. While you had a basic concept, the actual functioning system was developed here with our resources during your employment. Victor leaned forward, then dropping the pretense of camaraderie. His smile was gone, replaced by something sharper. "Let's cut to the chase. Precog belongs to Nextech. The board feels your compensation package is more than fair for what you've delivered." My throat tightened. "Compensation package? You'll receive a one-time payment of $250,000 when Precog goes to market," he said, almost bored. $250,000. For a system worth billions. For 18 months of my life, for years of research, for every sleepless night. The betrayal was like a physical blow. "Tomorrow," Victor continued, I'm presenting precog to our biggest investors. We expect to secure an additional 50 million in funding. After that, we'll announce our exclusive new product. My blood went cold. You're firing me, I whispered. Transitioning you out, Diana corrected, her tone icy. Effective immediately, with your bonus, of course. Congratulations, Sophia, Victor added, that predator's smirk curling his lips. Your employment is terminated. I should have screamed. I should have threatened legal action. But instead, an odd calm settled over me. They expected me to fight. They expected tears, anger, desperate pleas. What they didn't know was that I had seen this coming. 6 months earlier, I had discovered Victor accessing my development server after hours. He hadn't taken anything, but the intrusion was enough. From that moment, I began building safeguards not just against outside hackers, but against internal threats as well. I looked him dead in the eye, nodded, and handed over my laptop. Of course, Mr. Carlton. Good luck with the demo. His smirk deepened as though he thought he'd won. Security escorted me to my desk, watched as I packed my belongings into a cardboard box, stripped of my badge like some corporate cliché. To anyone else, it might have looked like defeat. But inside, I was smiling. Because on that laptop in the demo, Victor planned to show the investors there was code he didn't know about. Code I had buried deep inside Precog, invisible unless you knew where to look. And it was set to activate exactly 10 minutes into the presentation. That night I ordered takeout, watched meaningless TV, and waited. Not with panic, not with despair, but with a quiet anticipation, like a soldier waiting for the first strike in a battle she had already prepared for. At 9:30 p.m., my phone rang. It was Megan. Her voice was clipped, hurried. Victor wants to see you. Now. I almost laughed. It's nearly 10 o'clock. He says it's urgent, she insisted. A car is already on its way. I leaned back on my couch, sipping my drink, and smiled. The game had only just begun. 40 minutes later, I was back at Next Tech. The halls that had once felt like home now seemed foreign, hostile, their sterile white lights buzzing like interrogation lamps. A security guard escorted me into the conference room. Victor sat at the head of the table alone. But he didn't look like the man I'd left behind yesterday. His tie was loose, his hair a mess, his face pale with something I'd never seen before, fear. Fix it, he snapped the moment the door shut behind me. His voice cracked, desperation leaking through his usual control. I lowered myself into a chair, deliberately, slowly savoring the power shift. Fix what exactly? Don't play games, Sophia. You sabotaged the demo. I raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. How could I? I've been gone for 24 hours. Security watched me clear my desk. I didn't take any devices. I didn't access your systems. Victor slammed his palm against the table, the sound echoing in the empty room. The test run crashed the entire system. Precog went haywire, identifying threats that don't exist, spitting out thousands of false positives. It's completely unusable. I tilted my head, suppressing a smile. Sounds like a technical issue. Have you tried turning it off and on again? His face reddened. This isn't funny. We have 12 major investors arriving tomorrow. $50 million on the line. Your investors, I reminded him calmly. Your system now. For a long moment, he just stared at me, his breath heavy, his chest rising and falling like he'd run a marathon. Then slowly, he tried to soften his tone. Look, perhaps we were hasty yesterday. Maybe there's room for a more equitable arrangement. I said nothing, just leaned back in my chair, waiting. A co-creator credit, he offered. A larger compensation package, maybe even some equity. I pretended to think, tapping my finger on the armrest. What exactly happened during your test run, Victor? He hesitated. I could see the battle in his eyes, how much to reveal, how much to conceal. The system seemed to turn on itself. It started identifying components of Nextech's own network as threats. Then it generated hundreds of reports about what it called internal ethical breaches. I couldn't help it, a smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Precog is designed to identify threats. All threats. Maybe it's just doing its job. He paled. You taught it to spy on us. I taught it to recognize malicious behavior wherever it originates. External, internal, it doesn't matter. If there's a pattern of deceit, of intrusion, it will flag it. And then I saw it. The moment of realization dawning in his eyes. The system thinks I'm the threat, he whispered. Not you specifically, I corrected. Just certain behaviors. Unauthorized server access. Attempts to alter creator credentials. plans to misrepresent ownership to investors sound familiar. The silence between us was thick. He knew, and I knew he knew. "You can't prove any of that," he hissed finally, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "I don't need to," I said softly. Precog has been documenting everything for months. Every unauthorized login, every copied file, every altered document, it's all there, with timestamps, with keystroke records, with your name attached. His face drained of color. He leaned back, shaking his head slowly, calculating. I could almost hear the gears turning: fight or fold, attack or surrender. At last he rasped, "What do you want?" I let the silence stretch, savoring his desperation. Then I leaned forward, full recognition as Precog's creator and primary architect, 50% ownership of all patents and intellectual property, a board seat to oversee ethical implementation, and $10 million in compensation for your little stunt. His jaw clenched. "That's extortion." "No, Victor," I said, my voice calm as ice. "That's negotiation. Extortion would be me sending those reports to your investors and to the SEC. For a moment I thought he might leap across the table. Instead, he sagged back in his chair, defeated. His bravado was cracking, his empire trembling. He exhaled sharply. "The system. Can you fix it for tomorrow's demo?" "Precog doesn't need fixing," I said. "It needs authorization. Right now, it's flagging every command as unauthorized because its creator was cut out of the chain. Simple fix, really." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a flash drive, setting it on the table between us. "This contains the proper update. Restore my credentials, and the system will function as designed. Consider it a gesture of good faith toward our new partnership." His eyes darted from the flash drive to my face. "You planned this all along?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I hoped it wouldn't be necessary. But when I caught you poking around my server 6 months ago, I built in safeguards. For Precog, and for myself." "How did you know I'd try to cut you out?" he asked, his voice low, almost incredulous. I stood smoothing my blazer, my heart pounding with adrenaline. "I didn't know for certain, but Precog is designed to predict threats before they materialize. I guess some of that rubbed off on its creator." For a moment, he just stared at me. And in that silence, for the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. The next morning, I walked back into Nextech not as an employee, but as something else. The contract revisions were still being drafted, but Victor knew better than to cross me again. He introduced me to the investors with a smile that looked like a mask stretched too tight. "This is Sophia," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Co-founder, chief technology officer, and the visionary behind Precog." The demo began. This time, with my credentials restored, the system flowed flawlessly. Attacks simulated by the investors were neutralized effortlessly, the AI adapting in real time, learning, improving, dancing across the network like a guardian spirit. The investors leaned forward, eyes wide, murmuring to each other. One of them asked Victor, "What inspired the development of such a revolutionary system?" There was a beat of hesitation. Then Victor forced a smile. It was actually Sophia's brainchild, her vision from the beginning. Nextech just provided the environment for that vision to flourish. I hid my smile behind a sip of water, because in my pocket my phone buzzed with a private notification from Precog. "Threat neutralized. System integrity restored. Creator protections active." For the first time in 18 months, I felt something I hadn't dared allow myself to feel. Safe. But even in that safety, I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where I held the power they once tried to strip from me. 3 months later, Precog stopped being just my creation and became something bigger than me. Our first commercial implementation prevented a major attack on a banking network, saving the institution an estimated $340 million. Overnight, the industry began calling it the gold standard of cybersecurity. And while the world saw innovation, what I felt was something more complicated, a mix of vindication, relief, and grief for everything I had endured just to be heard. People asked me how it felt to be a co-founder of a company now valued in the billions. They asked me about the thrill of recognition, the pride of success. I smiled, gave them the polished answers they expected. But in quiet moments, the truth rose up in me like a tide I couldn't hold back. Success doesn't erase betrayal. Applause doesn't silence the memory of humiliation. I still remember that cardboard box in my hands as I walked out of the building. My badge stripped the sting of Victor's smirk burning into my back. That memory sits beside every win. It whispers to me when I lie awake at night. It asks how much of your soul did you give away just to prove you were worth believing in. Victor and I reached an equilibrium. He focused on business development where his charisma could charm investors and clients while I took the lead on technical innovation. Outwardly, we were a partnership. Inwardly, I knew better. Trust was gone, replaced by something colder: mutual necessity. He needed me to keep Precog alive, and I needed him to keep the investors satisfied. We coexisted, but we would never be friends. And yet there were moments when I caught him watching me with something that almost looked like respect. Or maybe it was just fear dressed up as admiration. Either way, it no longer mattered to me. His validation was no longer the currency I sought. What mattered was the lesson Precog had taught me. Technology, I realized, is only as ethical as the people who control it. And people, even the ones who smile the brightest, carry shadows. That truth became the cornerstone of how we deployed Precog going forward. Every contract included transparency protocols, ethical guardrails, built-in safeguards that could never be overridden by greed. I wasn't just protecting networks anymore. I was protecting my creation from becoming a weapon in the wrong hands. Sometimes I wonder if that's why I built Precog the way I did. Subconsciously, maybe I always knew the greatest threats don't come from faceless hackers in distant countries. They come from the boardrooms, from the colleagues who smile across the table, from the people who swear they're on your side. They come from inside. One evening, months after the investor demo, I found myself standing alone in the lab after everyone else had gone home. The hum of the servers filled the air, steady, comforting. I watched lines of code stream across the screen, Precog adapting, learning, evolving. It struck me then that I had given life to something that mirrored my own journey. Precog had been underestimated, doubted, nearly destroyed by the very people meant to nurture it. And yet, it survived. It grew stronger. It turned betrayal into fuel, deception into clarity, just like me. A memory surfaced, unbidden, my mother's voice years ago when I was 16, telling me I was wasting my time with computers. "Why don't you focus on something practical, Sophia?" "Something secure," she'd said, her voice sharp with disapproval. Back then, I didn't have the words to defend myself. I just stayed up later coding in secret, chasing a vision no one else could see. That night in the lab, I whispered to that younger version of myself, "We made it. They doubted us, but we made it." Of course, not everything was triumph. With every success came new questions, new pressures. Regulators wanted oversight. Investors wanted faster rollouts. Clients wanted custom modifications that sometimes pressed against the ethical boundaries I had sworn to uphold. It was a constant fight, one I carried on my shoulders with quiet determination. But the hardest part wasn't the negotiations or the technical challenges. It was the ghosts. The memory of betrayal lingered like a scar that refused to fade. I carried it into every board meeting, every contract negotiation, every moment of doubt. Sometimes I'd catch myself scanning faces, wondering who among them might be waiting with another knife. And yet I wouldn't trade the scar, because it reminded me of what I had survived. It reminded me never to hand over trust so cheaply again. The public saw headlines about billions raised, partnerships signed, governments approaching us for contracts. What they didn't see were the nights I still sat awake staring at the city lights outside my window, asking myself, how close did I come to losing everything? How close did I come to vanishing into silence, remembered only as a name on a forgotten patent? There's a peculiar loneliness in success. Everyone thinks you've won, so no one asks if you're still bleeding. They clap, they cheer, they celebrate, and you smile because it's easier than explaining the weight you carry. But inside, you still feel the sting of betrayal, the echo of a voice saying, you weren't enough. That loneliness followed me even into moments of victory. When Precog saved that bank $340 million, the executives cheered. Champagne bottles popped and cameras flashed. But I found myself slipping away to the restroom, locking the door, and staring at my reflection in the mirror. My hands trembled not from joy, but from the memory of Victor's voice telling me Precog wasn't mine. that I was nothing more than an employee to be discarded. I gripped the sink and whispered to my reflection, "They were wrong. You proved them wrong." And sometimes whispering it was the only way I could truly believe it. 3 months later, Precog went public. Our valuation soared to $4.2 billion. On the day of the IPO, a young developer approached me during the celebration. Her eyes shone with the same hunger I once carried. "What's your secret?" she asked breathlessly. "How do you build something so revolutionary?" I could have given her a technical answer, something about algorithms, predictive modeling, adaptive systems. But instead, I told her the truth. "It's not about the code," I said gently. "It's about understanding that the greatest threats often come from where you least expect them. Build systems that can recognize those threats, adapt to them, and protect themselves. That's how you survive. Not just as a system, but as a person." She nodded, eyes wide, perhaps not fully grasping the weight of my words. But one day she would. Everyone does eventually. Later that night, as I walked through the city streets with the celebration still echoing behind me, I felt something loosen in my chest. For the first time, the scar didn't ache quite as sharply. The betrayal hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined me. I had become something beyond it. And yet deep down I knew one thing would always remain true. Betrayal changes you. It hardens you. It teaches you lessons you never wanted to learn. But if you survive it, if you endure it, also gives you a strength no one can take away. There's a strange kind of quiet that follows vindication. The world claps, the cameras flash, the headlines declare victory. But inside you hear only silence. It's the silence of a wound that never truly closes, the silence of trust that cannot be rebuilt. In the months after Precog's IPO, I lived in that silence. Outwardly, I was celebrated, the woman who had revolutionized cybersecurity, the co-founder of a multi-billion-dollar company, the visionary who had turned a dream into an empire. But inside, I still felt the shadow of that cardboard box in my hands, the echo of Victor's smirk when he thought he had stripped me of everything. And Victor, he didn't vanish. He adapted the way he always did. To the public, he was still the charismatic CEO, shaking hands with investors, delivering smooth speeches at conferences. To me, he was the man who had once tried to erase my name from my own creation. We coexisted, but every time I walked into a boardroom and saw him across the table, I felt the tension coil in my chest like a spring. Sometimes he tried to bridge the gap. He'd compliment my work, ask my opinion on strategic directions, even offer a rare smile that might have once fooled me. But I saw through it now. His charm was just another mask, a weapon polished to perfection. One evening, after a particularly long board meeting, he cornered me in the hallway. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "we make a good team. You with the vision, me with the execution. We could take this company anywhere." I looked him dead in the eye, my voice low but steady. "We already did. But don't mistake coexistence for forgiveness." The flash of irritation in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He hated that he no longer had power over me. He hated that the woman he had tried to discard was now his equal. And yet, even as I stood firm, I couldn't deny the weight of carrying him as a partner. Betrayal leaves behind not just scars, but shadows. Shadows that darken every room, every decision, every handshake. I wondered how long I could live like this, tied to the man who had once tried to end me. Precog itself seemed to sense it. The system had grown far beyond what I first built. Its algorithms evolved, its capacity to analyze internal behavior patterns sharpened. One night alone in the lab, I received a private notification on my phone. "Unusual activity detected. Internal threat indicators rising. Source executive behavior patterns." I stared at the screen, chills racing down my spine. Precog wasn't just detecting attacks from outside networks anymore. It was watching us, watching him, watching me. For a long time, I sat there in the glow of the monitor, my reflection staring back at me in the glass. Was this what I had created? A system so advanced that it mirrored the paranoia in my own heart? Or was it simply telling me the truth? I already knew, but tried to suppress that Victor's greed would never disappear, only mutate, waiting for another opportunity. The thought haunted me. I began reviewing Precog's logs late at night, combing through the records it generated. Unauthorized server pings, subtle attempts to adjust access credentials, emails drafted and deleted half-formed plans that hinted at schemes not yet realized. It was like watching the shadow of betrayal preparing to rise again. And it forced me to confront a question I had avoided for too long. How far was I willing to go to protect what I had built? Was I willing to fight him again and again every time he tried to claw more power? Or was there a line I would not cross, a point where I would walk away, rather than let this war consume me? One evening as I left the office, Megan, the assistant who had once called me on that fateful night, caught up with me. She glanced around nervously before speaking. "Sophia, be careful. He's restless. He's been asking questions, meeting with people off the record. I think he's planning something." Her words confirmed what Precog had already whispered. The betrayal wasn't over. It was simply dormant waiting. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind circling the same thought: betrayal is a pattern. And patterns like threats can be predicted. Precog had been right before. And if it was right again, I had to be ready. But what does readiness look like when the enemy sits across from you in the same boardroom? What does revenge mean when you've already won once, but the wound still festers? I thought of my younger self again. The girl coding in secret, the woman who handed over her laptop with a calm smile because she knew what was hidden inside. She had always survived by staying one step ahead. So I began preparing, quietly, carefully. I built new safeguards into precog protections that no one else could override. I created hidden redundancies, encrypted systems that only I could access. I wasn't just defending the company anymore, I was defending myself from the possibility that history would repeat. Sometimes I caught Victor watching me in meetings, his eyes narrowing when I pushed back, when I refused to bend. And every time I felt that familiar chill, the reminder of what he had done and what he was still capable of doing. One evening, after another long day, I walked into my apartment and poured a glass of wine. I stood at the window staring at the city lights flickering like constellations, and I asked myself, how many battles can one person fight before she breaks? The answer didn't come easily, but I knew this much: I had already broken once, and I had rebuilt myself stronger. If it came to it again, I would do the same, because betrayal had taught me something Victor would never understand. Betrayal teaches you to see in the dark, to anticipate the knife before it strikes, to survive even when survival feels impossible. Precog wasn't just my system anymore. It was my reflection, my shield, my revenge written in code. And as long as I drew breath, I would never let anyone steal it from me again. The storm finally broke one gray Monday morning. I had just stepped into the boardroom when Precog sent an urgent alert to my phone. Internal breach detected. Unauthorized attempt to transfer ownership protocols. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up slowly, and there was Victor sitting at the head of the table with that familiar smirk, the smirk I had once mistaken for confidence but now recognized as hunger. The meeting began like any other. Quarterly results, investor updates, projections. But beneath the surface, I felt the tension thrumming, the weight of betrayal about to bloom once again. When it was Victor's turn to present, he spoke smoothly, unveiling plans for a new strategic direction. His words were polished, but the code streaming across my phone told a different story. He wasn't just proposing a new initiative. He was trying to cut me out, again. Precog had caught him red-handed. I let him finish, let the applause ripple around the table. Then when silence settled, I cleared my throat. "Interesting plan, Victor. But perhaps you should explain why your laptop is currently attempting to rewrite Precog's ownership protocols." The room froze. His smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" I slid my phone onto the table, the alert glowing bright. "Unauthorized transfer in progress. Initiator Victor Carlton." Gasps erupted. Board members leaned forward, whispering, eyes darting between us. Victor stammered something about technical glitches, about system errors, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew, I knew, and now they knew too. "I designed Precog to recognize threats," I said softly, my voice carrying across the silent room. "Even when the threat comes from within. Especially when it comes from within." His face flushed, fury and panic warring in his expression. "You can't prove anything." "Precog has been documenting your behavior for months," I replied calmly. "Every unauthorized access, Every attempt to alter credentials, every deleted email, it's all there, with timestamps, with your keystrokes. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then one of the board members, an older man who had always admired Victor's charisma, spoke. Is this true? Victor's lips moved, but no sound came out. His mask had cracked at last. In that moment, I could have destroyed him completely, sent the reports to the SEC, to the press, to every investor who once worshipped him. I could have left him in ruins, a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal, but instead I did something else. I stood, collected my papers, and looked him in the eye. I don't need to ruin you, Victor. You've done that yourself. I only need to protect what's mine. And then I walked out. That afternoon, the board convened without him. By evening, he was gone, forced out quietly, his resignation framed as a mutual decision. But we all knew the truth. He had tried to betray me twice. And the second time, he lost everything. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt the fire of revenge burning sweet in my veins. But what I felt was something quieter, something heavier. Exhaustion. Betrayal takes pieces of you each time. Even when you win, you don't come away whole. You carry the weight of the fight, the scars of the wound, the memory of how close you came to losing it all. That night, I sat alone in my apartment staring at the city below. Precog sent me another notification. Threat neutralized, system integrity restored, creator protections active. I let out a shaky laugh, tears stinging my eyes. The system I had built was protecting me even now, standing guard over the empire I had fought to keep. But it wasn't just Precog that survived. It was me. I thought of the girl I once was, the girl who stayed up late coding in secret, the woman who walked into a meeting with hope in her heart, only to be stripped of everything. I thought of her carrying that cardboard box, feeling like the world had ended. And I wanted to tell her, you'll survive this. You'll rise again. And one day you'll build something so strong that no one can ever take it away from you. Because that was the truth I had learned in the fire of betrayal. Success isn't about the code or the valuation or the applause. Success is about surviving the knives in your back and still finding the strength to stand tall. It's about turning scars into shields, wounds into wisdom. Victor was gone, but the lesson he left me with would never leave. Technology is only as ethical as the people who wield it. And people are fallible, greedy, selfish. That's why I built Precog, not just to protect networks, but to protect itself. To protect me. To make sure no one could ever erase me again. And maybe that's why betrayal, as brutal as it was, became the forge that shaped me. It forced me to become harder, sharper, unyielding. It taught me that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you must guard against most fiercely. As I sat there watching the night settle over the city, I whispered the words that had carried me through it all. You are enough. You always were. And for the first time, I believed them. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Never hand your worth to someone else. Never let their greed define your vision. And never ever doubt the power of the scars you carry. Because those scars, they are proof that you survived. They are proof that you are stronger than the betrayal meant to break you. And one day, those same scars will be the reason you rise higher than anyone ever believed you could. If my story touched you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below. I want to hear your stories, your struggles, your victories. Because together we remind each other that betrayal doesn't end us. It makes us unstoppable.